We have to be reflective in order to be effective as school leaders, as teachers, as educators. It requires us to examine our own biases, our own privilege, and our own assumptions. Inequity persists partly through unconscious bias, right? We spoke about that earlier. And this happens in schools, in our grading, in our discipline, and so many other things. Reflection helps us understand, how could I have done that differently? How could I have ensured that every kid got what they needed? It won't happen unless we reflect.
So, welcome to TomoClub Podcast. I'm Avinash Bansal, co-founder at TomoClub, and today we have a very special guest, Saint Clair Adriaan. He's a principal of PUC Cal's Middle School and Early College High School, and in Los Angeles. And today's topic of discussion is how do we disrupt inequity in our classrooms? Thank you so much for taking our time today, Saint Clair. Welcome to the podcast.
And thank you so much, Avinash, for having me today. I appreciate that, giving me the chance and the platform to speak about inequity within our classrooms.
No, absolutely. Pleasure is all ours. And so, what does it take, right, to disrupt inequity inside classrooms? Because a lot of times we discuss and we hear this that the classroom were never designed for every child to succeed. And when we were researching about you, you grew up under the apartheid in South Africa to leading school transformation across US. So you have dedicated your life in ensuring that every student experience dignity, belonging, and high expectations. So, and about the PUC CALs, I think it's a school built on early college access. How do you do restorative culture and community empowerment? So it's going to be super awesome discussing about your life journey. And we would love to hear it from you. What got you into education in the first place?
All right. So yeah, growing up in brown in apartheid South Africa taught me something visceral that I carry with me, like when I walk into every classroom. And that is that education is not neutral. The apartheid system used schools as instruments of oppression, literally designing different curricula for different race groups, different facilities, different futures based on the color of our skin. There was a song, a freedom song that we sang at that time that went Senzanina, Senzanina, which was translated as like, what have we done? And ended with the only sin was the color of our skin. That experience fundamentally shaped my understanding of schools as either sites of liberation or just reproducing masons, bricklayers, factory workers, and everything else within our colored and black schools. There was no middle ground. When I walk into Cal's every morning, I'm acutely aware of the education, American education, that has not been as equitable as one would hope. There's tracking, there's discipline disparities, there's access to advanced programs, dual enrollment, which is also not equitable, and that echoes the same patterns that was designed back in apartheid South Africa and that I witnessed as a child. But you know what? What keeps me going is that I witness the power of educators who refuse to accept those limitations, teachers who smuggled in banned books when the slogan of the day was liberation before education. They said no, education before liberation, because the liberation movement needs educated individuals. They taught me that leadership is an act of defiance against systems that fails children. That is why I became a teacher. And as a school leader, that is always governing how I think, how I address students, how I address families, how I address parents, and how I address teachers. It is important to understand the nature of the oppression that everyone is going through, particularly in education.
Now, that's a very powerful, I would say, purpose. And but I would love to understand that the reason that you got into education, is it still valid after so many years?
It is still valid, and now more than ever, because what I'm experiencing and what our kids are currently experiencing in the United States is so similar to a lot of things that I experienced growing up in apartheid South Africa, and there were two distinct. There's a bunch of things, but there were two distinct things, Vanesh, that drove me into education. One of them was a young boy. A group of friends of us were walking to downtown, and we were walking through a so-called white neighborhood. And as we were walking, all of a sudden, police sirens, police is stopping, putting out guns out. What are you guys doing here? Get out! And the words that stuck with me: "You do not belong here."
Hmm.
And on the second occasion, that was in the early 90s. South Africa was busy changing. We were almost there. I was now a part of an institution that was busy transforming, which now allowed black and brown students to come in at a quota rater. And we went to a hotel on the beachfront where we went out as a group of students. I was the only person of color.
Hmm.
And I was asked by the manager to leave because some other patrons refused to share space with people like me. So, you do not belong, people like me. It is my duty to make sure that every kid knows they do belong, they are enough, and that people like them should take up space.
It's absolutely true, right? That the inequities still exist in our society. So I would like to know, we are in 2025.
Yeah.
What are all the inequities that you see right now in your school and in society in general?
The inequities exist still with resources that are available to various schools. The way the education system is built based on taxpayers, so wherever the school is located, is dependent on how much money that school receives in funding. Inequity exists in the digital world. Who has access to all these computers? Who has access to Wi-Fi at home? Which kid goes home and has to do work on a phone and not on a laptop or not on a Chromebook? Inequities still exist in disparity with discipline. Let's take a look at expulsions and suspensions, and let's look at the minority groups that are mostly excluded from school. The same thing when it comes to advanced courses, dual enrollment. Our black and brown kids are still marginalized there and struggle to get access. And a lot of that is based on inequities. A lot of that is based on different mindsets. And a lot of that is based on the dominance culture that perceives, particularly people of color, to be less able to be successful.
Hmm.
And our behaviors are also seen as disruptive, as not wanting to be here, as dangerous, criminalizing language used towards our kid. One kid pushed another, and a teacher would report that the kid assaulted the other kid when it was a push. And those inequities are rife within our schools, within grading, within discipline, within expectations, and just with how even the families are perceived.
And that's true. I think some of them are been here for centuries, color and race. But I think on
Mm,
the technology part that you mentioned and the access to resources, I think that is a
yeah.
modern day inequity which can
Mm.
which can create massive gap in the outcomes for the students and for the working professionals. So we'll definitely dig in more in that. But before, I would love to understand that since you've worked in different cities and different states,
Mm.
so have you seen any kind of a pattern in that, uh, whether it's rural versus urban or anything that of your order that, or cosmopolitan cities versus non-cosmopolitan? What has been the inequity pattern that you could see?
So whether it's in the 7th Ward of New Orleans, whether it's Queens, New York, whether it's in East LA, I've encountered systems that require students to prove that they deserve respect, rigor, or opportunity.
Hmm.
That's backwards. Every child that walks through our doors already worthy. Our job is to build systems that honor that truth from day one.
Hmm.
How often do we hear, particularly about minority students, that parents don't care? They never come to meetings. We forget, in order to put bread on the table, that parent has 2, 3 jobs. Have we considered asking what time works for you
Hmm.
for that meeting? Everything else that goes with that. The other part is that we forget that proximity matters more than policy. We often have policies that are based on more westernized type of world when it comes to uniforms, when it comes to tardiness, when it comes to exclusion. And the important thing that I, as an educator, as a lifelong learner, said that most of what I know, what I do, and how I execute my leadership was not learned from consultants or conferences.
Hmm.
It's learned from listening to students, knowing the community from which they come, knowing parents, caregivers' dreams for their children, being part of that community, not just driving in, spending 8 hours there and leaving and not caring what else is going on over there. The inequities across many of the various schools, be it rural, urban, or in districts, in charter schools, is still that there are so much exclusion.
Hmm.
Students are being suspended, expelled in hallways, in principals' offices, and not learning for punitive reasons, leading directly into the school to prison pipeline. There is a problem that sometimes it seems as if teachers think that they were put in a school, in a classroom, to only teach smart kids, to only teach well behaved kids. And we forget that our responsibility and our job is to teach all kids.
Hmm.
And that mindset is often what leads to kids being treated differently and teachers not understanding or knowing what their blind spots of inequities are in
Hmm.
how they treat, how they speak to, and what their body language tells our kids.
That's actually a very interesting point that you brought up, that there are some unintentional inequity that arises in educators or school administration, not out of the um I would say any kind of negative feeling, but just because of
Mm.
what's easy and what's difficult. So everyone, as a teacher, of course, they are stretched thin. They are absolutely exhausted with so many things to do. They will also tend to be much more inclined, unintentionally, without any bias, to end up catering
Yeah.
to more disciplined and more bright kids. So that's very important to identify, right? Where this is,
Yes.
and call it out so that, and I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure once you call out any educator, he or she has an immediate realization in no time, and they're like, oh, I didn't even realize it. So
Think
that's
about
super
that.
good. Yeah. uh, Also about, since we have kind of defined inequity, uh, conscious and subconscious, I would love to know, how are you tackling, how are you disrupting this inequity in your journey till now, what you have learned, and what have your thesis now exist?
The most important thing is to ensure that when you speak as a school leader to your staff, that everyone clearly understands the difference between equality and
Hmm.
equity. Because most of us function within the paradigm of equality, but I'm treating every kid the same. I am giving every kid the same resources. what we don't understand that equality is not what every kids need. Equity means that every kid gets what they need to be successful, and thus equality could mean that yes, you're giving me what you're giving him, but it's not what I need right now. I recently had a professional development with my staff, and was introducing and speaking about inequity. And I wrote a poem, and I'll read the first stanza from a child's perspective that is neurodiverse, that is a minority, that is ADHD, that has autism and everything else, and asking the teacher, why don't you see me? And then we dug deep into the inequities that we actually see in class. It goes like this: see us, a plea for understanding. We sit in the back row, the hallway, the office, anywhere but where we're supposed to be. Not because we don't care, but because caring feels like drowning when no one throws a rope that fits our hands. Look at us, really look. We are the ones whose thoughts move like lightning, too fast, too bright, impossible to catch and pin down. We are the ones who see patterns miss. We who feel everything so deeply it becomes sound, who needs more time to think, to fidget, to focus, whose silence isn't empty but overflowing. You call us disruptive, we call it surviving. And this discussion was, it was amazing, because I broke it up into a jigsaw, and we went through the whole poem where the kids even say, we see your body language, we see when you look at the door, we know you're about to tell us, get out, right? And those are the inequities that further traumatizes our students, that further makes them hate school, hate education, hate socialization, doesn't want to be in there. So, in terms of, I have basically 4+1 main non-negotiables that I discuss with staff. And the first one is, you got to connect before you correct. Like challenges, deficit behavior approaches that proportionately harms our marginalized students. When teachers correct them without connection, they often misinterpret their cultural differences, communication styles, and trauma responses. Number one. Number two, you have to reach before you teach. And this dismantles the myth of standard student, cookie cutter, traditional curriculum. Everyone's got to learn the same way. It assumes that students arrive with similar cultural backgrounds, similar home upbringing, similar support at home, similar knowledge, and does not help the kids that are struggling and has been struggling all their life. Third one, restore. One of my favorite things, restorative practices. Restore before you expect more. Directly address trauma and its unequal distribution. Students experience poverty, racism, housing instability, or community violence can't perform the same way as a kid that has a beautiful night's sleep, woke up to a warm breakfast, and is sitting next to a kid that did not sleep because of gunshots all around the corner. And when he lays his head down, what does he or she get? Further yelling, get out, you lazy, instead of, I understand. Another form of inequity that we have. And then we have to be reflective in order to be effective as school leaders, as teachers, as educators. It requires us to examine our own biases, our own privilege, and our own assumptions. Inequity persists partly through unconscious bias, right? We spoke about that earlier. And this happens in schools, in our grading, in our discipline, and so many other things. Reflection helps us understand, how could I have done that differently? How could I have ensured that every kid got what they needed? It won't happen unless we reflect. And lastly, something that I believe every teacher should, or every educator, every school leader should enter a school with is don't let your storms wet your students. I acknowledge that teachers are human too, but they hold the power. When educators bring their frustrations, biases, or bad days into the classroom, they can weaponize that power, right, against our most vulnerable students who have no recourse. Marginalized students already face hostility in the world. Right now, just moving around in our neighborhoods, there's fear, there's worries, there's uncertainty. And when you come to a classroom, you're really a kid, should not be anxious, fearful. And that is why it's important that our storms don't wet our students. And those are what I believe, and that's what I share with staff and educators, and hope guides them into some actionable practices.
Wow, I think we need to definitely take out that particular section and make it as a playbook, because all those points were very well said. And the bigger problem definitely is that a lot of people around us, when you ask them, they know about it. It's not
Yes.
it's not like comes to them as a whole different idea or whole different alien idea. They know about it. It's the hardest part is to make it a part of your life, so that, or you have deliberately practiced enough these things that they start to show up in your every action unknowingly. So
Right.
that's what I want to dig in more, that how do you make
Hmm.
philosophy, or I will not call it philosophy, but more like principles, as
Hmm.
as a part of my everyday life. Do you have any suggestions, any recommendation on that side?
Right. So most of what I do and how I lead is it comes from the Ubuntu philosophy out of South Africa, right? So there's eight characteristics in Ubuntu that I designed a framework with the restorative practices, right? Restorative practices has 5 R's, and Ubuntu has 8 characteristics. And when you bring those two together, it will guide you, and it will guide your life as an educator to be on the lookout for inequities and change, because you become aware of all that. For Ubuntu, I am who I am because of you.
Hmm.
We are interconnected as humans, right? So one of the characteristics is caring. So we have to create the classrooms where students feel genuinely cared for, not just managed. Another one of the characteristics is compassion, responding to student behavior and struggle with empathy and not punishment. Right. So then I go to the 5 R's of the restorative practices. Relationships. Number one, build authentic connection before conflicts arise. Students don't learn from people they don't trust.
Hmm.
Students don't learn from people they don't like. Rita Peterson says that when she says every child deserves a champion.
Hmm.
Then there is repair, focus on healing harm, restoring community, and not just consequences.
Hmm.
How often do I see teachers mad because kids were not suspended, were not expelled, were sent back to the class to learn,
Hmm.
when there was a punitive behavior mistake a kid made? Instead of doing things that changes behavior, instead of repairing the harm, instead of giving the child a opportunity to give their part of the story. Kids don't learn at home while suspended, expelled. Kids don't learn in my office once put out of a classroom or in the hallway. Kids learn inside the classroom, and it is our responsibility as educators to figure out what the trauma is and how to deal with it, how to handle various things. Now, I'm not saying that there are times when um, there's administrative intervention required, but most of the time it's because kids are misunderstood, their disabilities are misunderstood, misinterpreted. What they say is taken out of context. But the biggest thing that teachers, educators need to understand is that in today's world, what we as adults see as respect is not the same as what a kid sees as respect. The biggest thing you can do to a kid in form of disrespect is to publicly humiliate him or her, to call them out in front of their peers, or to make them feel small. And then again, no one likes that.
No, that's very well articulated. I think if that's been followed, it can actually become a way of life. These and that disrupt. Then there will be no concept of disrupting inequity in the first place, right? Because it will just come naturally to anyone, right? Um, Also, I would love to understand about the fact that, so I have this theory that the
Mhm.
future of education is all about personalized education. So a school is solving for two things. One is the content, the curriculum material, and one is socialization. So the point
Mhm.
is that we club them together in a classroom setting where we want to complete the content, but we also don't want kids to talk to each other or kids to, uh,
Mhm.
and we don't want that to be a two-way communication most of the times, because otherwise we'll never be able to complete our course. So do you think with AI as a technology, right, can actually, because I'll give you one more example. So when I do teacher training, if it's a 2 to 3 teachers that I'm training for some product, that training
Mhm.
happens to be so quick and usually completes in half the time that we predicted. But when we are in a group of 15 or 20, some
Mhm.
teachers who are able to understand in the first go, they feel bored. And the teachers who are still able to, struggle, not able to catch up, they need more support. So for them, it's still difficult. So the problem is that in a group setting, every child or everyone has a different learning speed. So the inequity, even if how empathetic you are, even though you have been giving support, but a group setting will automatically bring inequity in education. What are your thoughts on that?
All right. So, in a group setting, the important part is that it's a group needs to be put together intentionally.
Interesting.
And when I say that intentionally, I also want us to understand that today, in terms of addressing inequity or inequitable pedagogy, universal design for learning plays a big role. And so when teachers start, working within the paradigm of universal design, which means that even in that group, the students will be able to present a product in various ways, showing their mastery, not a cookie cutter method.
Hmm.
So there is a time when we need homogeneous grouping to catch everyone up, and then that's when there's direct instruction from the teacher. So everyone that's on the same level. Heterogeneous grouping is important, where you have the kids that are advanced,
Hmm.
leading, the students that are in the middle, supporting, and the kids that are struggling or emerging um, within their mastery is being taught and or thus learning from their peers, and in such a way that successful group learning who take place. Peer learning is very underrated.
Yeah.
Sometimes students learn much more from their peers than from the teacher itself. So intentional grouping with smart, and when I mean smart, it means that the students know exactly what the outcomes and what expected outcomes are. and
Mhm.
the directions are clear. And then there's the work around the social cognitive theory um, that indicates that uh, the teacher models to the kids.
Mm.
There is, in that group that you're talking about, there are clear norms that has been set. And that social cognitive theory, Bandura, um, states that it allows for that conversations to take place, the modeling to take place, and then for students to learn in a social context.
No, I could actually relate. So a lot of our product also
Hmm?
allow mixed age class students to work together. And
Yeah.
we haven't ever seen, at least personally, I would love to see that same age group kids doing that support to their, struggling
Mhm.
peers, or the struggling peers asking for help from the someone who has been able to be quick to learn. But I have
Okay.
seen this a lot in mixed age thing. A,
Yeah.
a kid in a fourth grade will automatically have a tendency to help a third grade or a second grade kid because of the virtue that I am a senior of the hierarchy.
Yeah.
So, so I could relate what you just said as a solution in a group setting. Um, Maybe making kids feel that they have to support each other, calling it out uh,
Right.
explicitly. I think that can help, because otherwise you cannot, like, it may not be organically happening. That's what I'm thinking.
Yes. Yes, it will not happen organically. What we need to understand is that the current age, particularly if we're having middle schoolers, our middle schoolers currently are native digital
Hmm.
students. They were born into Wi-Fi,
Yeah.
and the brain rot is there. The older kids maybe came a little bit later, but with all that, it impacts and affects socialization so much. Most of the games our kids play is where they are hurting each other on the games and dogging each other, negative, very little about the Ubuntu concept of their interconnectedness, compassion, and empathy. So that needs to be taught.
Hmm.
We cannot expect kids to know that. We cannot expect to punish kids and think they will learn that if no one has taught them that.
Hmm.
So it must be part of our curriculum um, in terms of building students' characters. Too often we are stuck in test scores without understanding that we need to educate the whole child,
Hmm.
because a 4.0 GPA student with no social skills is also going to struggle once they get to college.
Hmm.
There needs to be a balance.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And since you brought the digital native citizens that our
Yeah.
children are, so let's talk about the AI. I think
Oh,
the, I think the AI will. So, for example, if I am more comfortable using AI in everyday life, the
yeah.
speed at which I can complete my task, the output quality of my task, um, the amount of research and I can produce in a short time, if I'm able to use AI ethically, responsibly, and as a right tool, versus someone who doesn't understand AI, versus someone
Mm.
who is gonna use AI just like Google search and will doesn't have that knowledge or aptitude to completely understand its potential. Their output of work will be tremendously poor as compared to the
Mm.
output of work I'll bring in. So even
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
we both have the same uh, contextual understanding of a concept, or we have the similar academic background, the AI can create a massive rift in the school life, college life, or work life.
Mm.
So I think the digital divide of AI, the inequity due to AI
Mm.
will be far beyond than we can imagine uh,
Yeah.
ever happened in human civilization. That's my code. I would love to know your opinion on that.
Yeah. So what I would say is that, the one thing I know is that AI cannot love a child. It
Hmm.
cannot see the trauma in their eyes. It cannot sit with them when they're breaking. It cannot bear witness to their brilliance in ways that transform their self concept. Those fundamental human acts are where transformation happens, especially in students who've been systematically dehumanized. So, this is what I say
Hmm.
we can do. Because number one, AI amplifies teachers, it doesn't replace them.
Yeah.
We use AI, handle logistics, grading, multiple choice tracking, and generating practice problems. This frees teachers because, planning and everything else in one prep period is demanding. So AI is a extremely useful tool, but as I said, will not replace them. The next one is AI must be used to close the gaps, not to widen them. We
Hmm.
have um, the digital gap, we have the academic gap, and everything else. And AI must be applied within classes to support students to narrow that gap. Right now, affluent students, as I said earlier, have access to premium AI tutors, personalized learning platforms, all the great computers and digital platforms. And then we have our students in our schools, immigrant, first gen, no Wi-Fi, and we cannot leave them further behind. And this became so real during COVID. On that day in March, when we had to send kids home, and we're now going online and understanding that it's not as easy as you think. Not every kid in the school has Wi-Fi. Not every kid has a computer at home. And I use the word oppressive, which upset some people in my school when I said it is oppressive to send kids home to work digitally without the necessary tools. And that AI can just be just as impactful in widening the digital gap, like what happened during COVID. So making sure that we support all the kids, particularly if a school is one-to-one, with kids being able to go home with that Chromebook, and those who are not able, we provided with hotspots, etc. And then lastly, transparency and student agency over AI use, right? A kid should be able to give you an amazing generative essay, but
Hmm.
if they use AI, must acknowledge
Absolutely.
this is my original, but this is how I used it. So to make it not a sneaky type of plagiaristic type of thing. AI literacy is an equity skill that must be taught within all our classes to all our students, right? Because these are the tools that if we don't know them and we go into college, go into the real world, we are further left behind.
Hmm.
AI is here. AI is not going anywhere. And seeing it as a barrier or as evil will not help our kids. Because, as I said, AI, it will be in all spaces.
Got it.
And we have to support.
Absolutely. No, very well said. So I love your thought process on that. And I think that's a stepping stone in making sure that AI inequity doesn't exist in the first place and we start to address it heads on. So I think we did cover up a lot of topic
Mm.
like around how do we disrupt inequity in a classroom. There is another section in our podcast where we actually ask every guest a
Okay.
question which has been passed on by the previous guest.
Okay.
So the previous guest that we had in our podcast, they were asking one question that how do you deal with students who refuse to comply even after they have done all kind of interventions?
Okay. So let me tell you what recently happened to me. I had a student sent to the office, Um, the student was extremely disrespectful towards me too.
Mm,
Asked, and I, in a very calm voice, said to him, "Why would you think that it's okay to speak to
mm,
me like that?" I said, "Have I ever disrespected you? Have
mm,
I ever spoken to you in such a manner that it makes you feel kind of disrespected?"
mm.
And he said to me, "Now you see, that's the problem.
Okay.
Because I've never had someone speak to me like they care. And I've never had someone who showed me that they can listen to me when I speak, and I don't know how to act."
Mm, okay.
So sometimes what it takes is not at the moment when the kid is mad or when you're going back and forth, at a different moment to sit down and say, let's just go back and can you talk to me about what happened that day?
Mm,
Maybe you'll find out my dog died this morning. We were in an accident on the way to school. Sometimes the root cause
mm,
is what is missing. And when we as adults and educators go and keep going, yelling at the kid, showing some form of disrespect because we feel that the kid is not learning, we bring more darkness
mm,
into that kid's world. And because of that, there's a few ways a kid reacts when that happens. Number one, they can shut down. Number two, they can lash out. Number three, they can, just because of that shame, decide now I'm going to even act worse.
mm.
So sometimes it is that compassionate listening that's missing. And then also the explanation of how that behavior affects me, how it made me feel, how it affects our community, and then leaving the question to the kid, how could you have done this differently?
I think the previous guest will love this answer. I'm going to definitely send it back to them. Any question that you have that you want to ask,
Pass
then
on.
pass it on. Yeah.
The question that I have is, um, Avinash, I've got a book that I co-authored that will be coming out within the next 2 weeks
Mm,
on metacognitive clarity.
okay.
And that is some tied into some of what we talked about today. It is rigor and bringing democracy, bringing that, teaching kids how to work together. That's what it's all about in
Right.
those groups that you're asking me about, and that's all about that. So my question to the next guest would be will be like, how do you get students to use metacognitive skills? In other words, how you get them to think about their thinking.
Hmm. How you make them think about it. Okay. How to
How
make
you
them
make them think about the way they think.
think. That's important. I think it's like how to learn. Sometimes that's also very important science. And I think I'll definitely get back to you when I get that answer.
That's exciting. It'll be good to know.
Well, thank you so much, Sinclair. I think this was very powerful work that you have been doing and for leading with courage and compassion. And honestly, your journey reminds me of that disrupting inequity starts with a belief and it
Right.
can become real through consistent daily action, which you just presented. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about all this, and yeah, thank you.
Have a good day.